Well, I'm really excited to have Stephen Boudreau with us today. Stephen is a co-founder of Raise Donors, and who better to have on the panel to be talking about digital fundraising in post-COVID era. And Stephen, just first, welcome to this interview, but also welcome to the Digital Ministry Conference we're having next week, June 17 and 18. But first, could you just share with us a little bit about your background and why you became so passionate about fundraising in the digital space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I got out of college, 20 plus years ago, I moved to Dallas, Texas without a job. I just knew my soon-to-be fiance was going to law school at SMU and I had to go there. And so I actually kind of intersected when the ministry Insight for Living was moved from California to Texas. And this young kid who didn't really know that much about fundraising or even nonprofits got hired to be one of their web guys. And so that was kind of where I started venturing into understanding what it meant to fundraise, not just from a nonprofit perspective, but even specifically about how ministries fundraise and the kinds of practices they have. And I learned a lot in that time, but really even when I started my first business, I wasn't really focused on, hey, I want to serve ministries or I want to serve fundraising even. It was just, that was my network. And so you start taking deeper and deeper and deeper steps. You go from understanding something as simple as a landing page, then you start understanding how data flows through systems and how that impacts one job, which impacts the other job, which impacts the other job. But really what it's really impacting is how you relate to the donor. Because if you're quick, if processes are efficient, you can really focus on being gracious, on showing gratitude, on building a relationship with your donor. But when those systems are broken, then you're focusing on technology and fixing problems, and your donors are getting forgotten. And they're getting the perspective that you don't care about them, which is not true. You're suffering. And so the longer and longer I've been in the space, the past 20 years, the more I realize that kind of that silent killer to generosity is inefficiency and bad technology and unhelpful services. And so my business partner, Chris, and I, we've just committed ourselves to building technology that is simple and flexible. Things that anyone can use, but then a developer can go and make it just hum and go full throttle. So that's kind of how I got into this space and want to stay in it forever.
That is so cool. I didn't realize that you worked for Insight for Living.
Yeah, way back when.
So we have something in common because right out of my introduction to the tech world shortly after college was also working for a large ministry, international ministry, very similar to Insight for Living. So
yeah,
that is very neat how our paths have been similar, parallel for a while, and now intersecting the last few years. You mentioned something, a silent killer of generosity is the inefficiency of systems that are running in the back end. Man, that is such an important concept for both small and large complex ministries to understand. What are some of the ways where you've seen that worked out, even some practical examples where you've seen, they had an inefficient process, and then once they got it figured out, they were able to expand their generosity? Do you have any examples where you've seen that with the organizations you've worked with?
I've shared this story with you before. I'll share here. It's a bigger, more dramatic example. But first, I want to say that this only gets worse the more successful you become. It's like the unintended consequence of growth, like the pain and suffering of success, if that makes sense. Because you have this idea, you almost have this technical debt built into your process that when you only have 100 donors, yeah, I can manage moving this cup over to that table by myself. But when you have 1,000 things happening, moving that cup becomes a burden. Just the manual processes that you have, you really don't know what they're costing you until you start reaching levels of success. So an example is we worked, this is probably 6 years ago now, we were approached by an organization and everything was manual. So when someone would give an online donation, someone in their office would print it out, type it into their CRM, type it into their accounting system. Okay, an order comes in from their store, same process. So you can imagine when you're only getting one donation a day, no problem. Why would we invest in anything better than this? But as you grow and as you succeed, Well, now those processes are not only holding you back, but now donors aren't getting that personal thank you call, that personal thank you letter that they were getting before. Or at least if they do get it, now it's weeks or months behind, whereas before it was the next day. So you can start to see what that can cause in the future. So we worked with this organization, and really when it all came down to it, they were estimated that they had 40 hours of manual processes that they had people working on every single week. So an entire person's job was just doing these processes. And even then they weren't really keeping up, but they were surviving. So we worked with them, and it wasn't a snap of the finger, but through the process, we automated all of that away. So great, we can all cheer, we can be happy, good. But now they have 40 hours a week that they didn't have before. And so you can have, this is where I think nonprofits and ministries really have an opportunity to feel just the benefit of having prudently invested in technology. Because now they took those resources, all the people who were dedicated doing manual processes, and they redirected them towards their donors. So these people, they got their donor record, their CRM, which was now always up to date, and said, okay, who hasn't given us a gift in 2 years? Let's call these people and re-engage with them. And it wasn't to ask for a gift. At no point in these calls was it, hey, we want you to donate again. But it was, hey, we want to thank you for your support in the past of us, of our ministry. And we wanted to let you know what's going on with the ministry. We want to ask, is there anything we can pray for? So really just personalization to the max. Now, if you're overwhelmed with technology burdens and manual processes, you're never going to have the time to do that. And so once they started doing that, it was like, okay, who hasn't given a gift in a year and a half, in a year, in 6 months, in 3 months? And they just continuously built this new process that was all about re-engaging with donors and reconnecting and letting people know, hey, your gift matters because you matter. And we do this because we want to help people like you. And it actually ended up generating hundreds of thousands in revenue that was not even the purpose, but it's sort of a picture of what transformation really looks like, because now the ministry has exploded and grown. But it all started with somebody committing, hey, let's not just keep this broken process, let's fix this broken process. And then they made wise decisions from then on. So it was great.
That's so good. And the ability to scale, and it's not just that process as it ties to fundraising too. I mean, we've seen it where 5Q has helped a mission agency streamline. They would receive hundreds of applicants from the HR side every year for different openings, educations around the world, and everything was manual. And it's the same thing when you go in and really help an organization streamline those processes. They can focus more on their mission, not just on the inefficiencies that are happening in the back end. It really almost like gives some wind beneath their wings to be able to make things happen.
Yeah, we always kind of joke that raised donors should be kind of this invisible partner. Like the moment a donor becomes aware of raised donors, it's because something's wrong. Something isn't working the way it should, because like, who runs this? What is going on?
That's right.
It should just be so smooth and efficient that no one knows what raised donors is except for the organization who's leveraging it.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the digital fundraising space right now?
Well, I think it depends really on the type of organization, the size of the organization. I know for smaller to mid-sized ministries, I think that there's a thirst to try something different. Let me expand on that a little, because I think the initial question people have is, should we be fundraising during this time? And I think if we just go into this conversation with the assumption the answer is yes, well, that's where I think you can start trying new things, and not maybe new things to fundraising, but new things to your organization. Something like personalizing your landing pages a little more based on what the donor wants or who they are. So for example, if a donor has previously expressed interest in marriage resources, hey, well, let's have a campaign dedicated to that felt need. Or conversely, I mean, really, again, it depends on how deep you've gotten into fundraising before. So there's that felt need targeted landing page, which I think is really fascinating. You can also create targeted landing pages based on previous giving amounts. Again, people are just thinking differently. Hey, let's segment our list and have a higher gift array for donors who've given more in the past, etc. Also personalizing the message so that, hey, if I have a ministry that's all about helping families in need, don't just talk about how XYZ charity is helping families in need. You know, let's talk about the Johnson family who was transformed by the gifts that people like you are giving. I think when I see trends, I see people just thinking about fundraising in ways that they previously thought, well, only organizations with huge marketing budgets could do before. Because the truth is that every organization has stories to tell. A lot of times we just don't have the time or the will to craft that story and to get it done. Again, going back, I have all these other things to do. I don't think about the best way to talk to people. So I think emotionally, for me, the biggest trend I see is people just trying harder. People really asking the question, how do I do this better? Now, if you want to talk about technology trends, I see a lot more people dipping their toes into things like peer-to-peer marketing, because that's really personal. That's not something Raise Donors does, but it's just, I'm in the space, I see it. I see a lot of people thinking, well, how can I, Stephen Boudreau, help raise money for the organization that I support? So I definitely see a lot of that happening, but what I see our customers doing more is asking, hey, what are your most successful customers doing? What are they trying? And it's funny how so many of them will be like, well, why would I need more than just a couple donation pages? And it's like, well, let's talk, because you knock that first domino down and it's just like those viral videos of dominoes just spreading, and you see this entire room just kind of move forward. It's really exciting to see people thinking about how to do better, because really that's just a good philosophy of life.
Yeah, that when we put our attention into something and ask ourselves, what if, what could be, what if we tried this? One of our other interviewers the other day said their organization tries to shoot rifle bullets, see what works, drop what doesn't work before they roll it out into a big cannon and put a lot of resources behind it. And
Yeah.
You also, really, a lot of the things you talked about was personalizing the experience for that donor or potential donor. And Amazon's been doing that for years. Netflix has been doing that. I'm thrilled to see what you guys are doing that. Our product that we've built, Journey, really is all about that personalized experience, and specifically for the ministry space. So I'm thrilled that we're actually bringing some of this technology so that ministries can be using it as well.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So what about? I mean, we're having this conversation. You're at your house. I'm at my home office. We've all been impacted in some way. All the organizations have by COVID in some way. What impact have you seen COVID in the pandemic have specifically on the digital fundraising side of things?
Well, I think for organizations that I see succeeding and growing at this time, one, they're continuing their fundraising strategy. I almost want to say as normal, but it's not as normal. But they're continuing to ask, they're continuing to share those stories, but they're not tone deaf. There's empathy in the way that they're asking. It's not just COVID, it's everything happening in the world. If you don't address things in context, then you don't feel personal. So it's almost as if you got a form letter that said, hello, friend, or hello, Chad, but they misspelled Chad. Like, you immediately feel like, oh, something's off. In the same way, if you send someone a letter and it doesn't address, hey, the way things are happening in the world right now, we understand that times may be tough. Or just, if you don't address that, then you're missing an opportunity to connect personally, because now they know that you're thinking about the world, you're thinking about them. You're not just resending last month's letter again. So I think the tone is the biggest thing that I'm seeing that leads to more successful fundraising. Because if you already have the systems in place, if you already have a strategy in place, well, now you just have to adjust the message. But because things are slowing down a bit, it's a great time to get that strategy. It's a good time to think about trying those new things. But I think that's, if you continue to ask, you need to have, you can't be tone deaf. Let me put it in negative terms. Don't be tone deaf. Be prudent in the way you speak.
That concept of being tone deaf, especially, can really, really go awry. You use with personalization gone wrong. One time, probably 5 years ago, I got a postcard in the mail, and it said on there, "Hey Chad, make the true love Jessica of your life really happy by giving her this piece of jewelry, a necklace."
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem with that was my wife's name is Karen, not Jessica. so to the wrong household, that could have actually been a real and I have no idea where they got the name Jessica, because we never had any staff members. I don't have any kids named Jessica, just really random. But yeah, the importance of being tone deaf, the importance of not being tone deaf, the importance of listening to your audience, listening to what's going on around us, and crafting the message to fit the need of the moment. That's really good. So your session is going to be on digital fundraising post-COVID. Who would you say is the right audience for your session at the Digital Ministry Conference next week?
Well, I don't want to sound silly, but anyone who depends on donors to drive their mission forward. Anyone who's looking to do better. And when you look at what fuels your mission, it's donors. Well, I think those are the people that are going to benefit from the conversation that Gabe and Brad and I will have. I mean, Gabe and Brad have a well of knowledge and a depth of information far deeper than mine. I look to them all the time for their advice. So I think anyone who depends and relies on the generosity of donors to grow their mission would benefit from whatever the panel discussion ends up being, because we're all in the thick of it, and we see not just one organization, we see hundreds and thousands of organizations. So there's things that I probably don't even realize we'll talk about right now that I know will come up, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's really good. I know the conference, we're really focused on the decision makers and practitioners in ministries that are in the digital space. So whether it's the managers and directors, or even the designers, developers, project managers, content writers. But at the end of the day, this session can be so much broader than that. It's about the fundraisers. It's about those that are on the front lines interacting with folks that can gain new insights about how to better communicate. And so I'm really thrilled for this session, as well as the other sessions that we'll be having at the Digital Ministry Conference next week. Stephen, one last question for you. What is your favorite book or favorite resource just on leadership? You've been leading an organization for quite some time. I love to learn from other people about how what it has impacted them. So what's your favorite book or resources on leadership?
Well, I'll give you two answers. One, maybe the answer you might expect, and then one just let you into my brain for a second. Someone that I've been looking to the past couple of years is, I'm sure you've probably heard of the author named Donald Miller.
Story brand.
Yeah. So a few years ago, my business partner actually forwarded me an email from something from Story Brand. And I've just gotten so much out of his podcast and his seminars and his resources. I guess I look at it the same way as I see so much of how Raise Donors does things. It's a very simple yet flexible framework. It's a very refreshing way to look at your message. Because one of the things I think, and you probably relate to this too as a business owner, is a lot of times it's hard to articulate what it is we do, why it is we do it. And we can get to it eventually, but the more clarity you can enunciate that with. I've been really impressed and inspired by that over the past couple of years. But when you mentioned the word leadership, this is the kind of nerdy answer that I think, one of the things that I've gotten into the past, I would say 6 months or so. I read my kids one of the Harry Potter books, and I got so into it. I was like, this is a great story. And so now I've gone through all of them. And when you said the word leadership, because I'm in the nerd phase of my life right now, I immediately thought of this character named Dumbledore, who kind of runs the school that all the kids go to. And I just saw him as such a selfless leader who was able to lead with a firm hand, but also express love. And that's just something that I think is really important. You know, it's the human side. When we get in events like this and we talk business, it's real easy to only talk about, to only show the side of us that we think is smart or wise or prudent. But I think there's a human component, and that's so true in fundraising. Fundraising is fun in so many ways because it's a space that not only deals with technology, but it deals with the human emotion. It's like, why would I give? Why would I give, and why would I give to you? You know, answering that question is an exercise that you can do for your entire life, because it's an ever-growing emotional experience that is about thought sequences, about emotional heartbeats, connection. So yeah, so I was drawn to that character because he is a leader who is both human and brilliant. So there you go.
Wow, that's really good. I think you're the first person I've heard mention Dumbledore as their leadership hero. But there's a lot there. I've made it through about half of the Harry Potter books, so I'm not quite as nerdy as you are for reading all of them. But yeah, I think there's a lot there. You know, especially in the area of, like what you said, having a firm hand, but also showing humility. And I did a webinar a few weeks ago on how to lead in a distributed environment, remote environment. I think it's so easy for us to think so much about the technology and think so much about what are we getting done, that we have to remember that when you're in a remote environment, you have to take time to, like when you're in a physical space, it comes naturally to stop by the cubicle, say, how you doing? How's your day going? And we have to be intentional about that as leaders when we're leading remotely, and to allow space, allow time for connecting with people at the personal level, as well as just, hey, are things getting done? And so I really appreciate how you bring it back to, you know, there's this whole human component of leadership that's really, really important, that has to be there. People have to know that
when you lead with empathy, you will design with empathy. You will develop with empathy. You will guide people with empathy. You'll talk to people with empathy.
Yeah. So
it's like training for a marathon. You got to train to be a person who tries to put other people first, because it's easy to just fall into, I'm tired, just leave me alone. No, you got to train that muscle just like anything else.
Absolutely right. Well, Stephen, thanks so much for sharing with us a little bit today. Lots of good tidbits of wisdom, and just a sneak peek, a picture of what the session is that we'll have next week. And so again, if you're watching this, just encourage you to for yourself to sign up and attend the Digital Ministry Conference next week, and ask your team members, ask your coworkers and other organizations to come and attend, because it doesn't cost a thing. We're not charging anything for this. But really, it's our desire just to give back to the community and help folks think intentionally, strategically about digital, and about how we can continue to do ministry in the digital space. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much, Stephen, for joining us.
Thank you.